Hi, everybody. Welcome to the longest, shortest time Google Hangout called What's Up with Your Boobs. We are going to be finding out what is up with your boobs and getting answers on that. This Hangout comes to you from the longest, shortest time and WNYC. We have a lot of breastfeeding questions to get to, but first I want to introduce everybody and also just introduce you to my office. This is where I work. You can probably see evidence that a child lives here behind me, her toys, and there's all kinds of stuff on my desk like, little Post-its and watermelon notepad thingies. Also just to remind you, we collected a lot of our questions ahead of time, but if you still want to submit questions while we're doing this live, you can do it two ways. One way is to click the button that says Q&A in the Google Plus Hangout page, or you can go to Twitter and use the hashtag #YourBoobs. So here are our guests. First we have Nancy Holtzman, who is our resident lactation expert here. She is a board-certified pediatric nurse. She has 25 years of lactation consulting experience. You might be familiar with Nancy already because she used to host a great series of breastfeeding and baby rearing webinars through the parenting resource ISIS Parenting. And sadly, ISIS closed in the winter, but we are pleased to be bringing Nancy back today to the webinar format. So, hi, Nancy. And Paula Schumann, I keep pronouncing her name wrong. Paula Schumann is my colleague. She is the digital director at WNYC and also a mom. She has two kids, 2.5 years old and 4 years old. And Paula, when she found out I was doing this Hangout, begged me to be a part of this.
Begged?
And I'll let her, yes, begged. Please let me be a part of this.
Okay.
I have to be on this. Okay, anyway, I'll tell you why. I'll let her tell you why in a minute. Finally, we have a listener, Lee, who told you, actually, that's not her real name. We are protecting her identity here, even though you can see her face. So Lee is here. She's a listener to the show. We told you that we'd be picking somebody out of all of the questions to join us, and so she is the one we chose, and she has kind of a multifaceted question for Nancy, so you're going to be hearing that. So welcome to Paula and Lee as well. So Nancy, I want to start with you. We've all heard the phrase breast is best, and I know that you have some reservations about using that phrase yourself. I want to find out from you, can you briefly tell us what is the science behind breast milk? How much better is it than formula? And as a lactation consultant, how do you determine when it might be healthier for a mother-baby pair to maybe switch to exclusive pumping or formula?
Sure. Well, I'll put right out there, I'm a breastfeeding advocate, and I'm an advocate of breast milk, but I'm also an advocate for moms and for babies and for, general physical and emotional wellness for moms and babies and families. So I think one of the most important things when it comes to feeding is to understand what is the family's feeding goals and then help the mom and baby and the family try to get closer to those goals. A very wise lactation consultant mentor told me a good 20, 25 years ago that you can't want it more than the mom does. And that was great advice that I remember frequently, because breastfeeding can be very, very hard. And just like that saying about, walking a mile in somebody else's shoes, I've seen moms crawl over glass to try to breastfeed their babies. And I've seen moms who, have a small bump in the road and they overcome it. And then a week later they decide to throw in the towel. And you can't want it more than the mom. Breast milk is very important. And for 75 years, companies have been trying to replicate breast milk or try to create a formula that functions as good as breast milk, and they haven't been able to. So we know that human babies thrive best and their immune system is stimulated best, especially during the earliest weeks on breast milk. So my goal is to help moms that want to breastfeed or feed their babies breast milk accomplish that goal to the best of my abilities and their abilities. Again, that said, everybody's goal is different. So I want to listen to where the mom is at, where she's coming from, where she plans to go, and then use the information and experience that I can to work with her to create a plan that seems doable for her.
And just, there are lots of people who would say, well, I was a formula-fed baby, and I grew up and didn't have allergies, but my sibling was given breast milk and has lots of allergies. Really, what is the science behind it? How much better is it?
Well, the science, particularly for premature babies and for brand new babies, they're born and their immune system, many people don't realize this, but the immune system lives in the gut. For the brand newborn and the baby that's 2 and 4 and 6 weeks old, the gut is the first line of defense for their immune status. And so what coats the intestines and what flushes it with growth hormones and with antibodies and polyunsaturated fatty acids, all of those things are really, really important. And you can actually sensitize a baby very, very early on by introducing foreign proteins at a time where the baby is most vulnerable. So their immune status is most vulnerable during those early weeks and months. And so that's why, especially in the early days, breastfeeding and colostrum is so important. And that's why even for premature babies in the NICU, if the mom is not able to provide breast milk, that's why now we have more and more human milk banks that are providing a safe source of human milk, because we know that that's what's going to help those babies stay healthiest. We can all look at individual situations, this child, that child, my neighbor, his neighbor, but the Cochrane reviews and myriad research does show that human babies do best on human milk.
Okay, great. And so now we're going to start with our questions. Lee, I'd love to have you start and ask part 1 of your question.
Sure, thanks. So my baby's 5.5 months old now, and when I first had her, I was really committed to exclusively breastfeeding, but my milk ended up coming in kind of late after 7 days, and I was, it just, she wasn't gaining enough weight, and at first it was like, oh, the milk came in late, and then as it went on, it wasn't that she was losing, but she wasn't gaining, and she had lost that initial 10% and wasn't getting it back. And I had multiple lactation consultants who were all really nice, and they saw and they were like, wow, that's a good latch, and no, I had pumped a little bit just to see, and they're like, no, your supply is good from pumping, but she was unhappy. I don't know, and I just really resisted even trying formula for a long time because I really wanted to make it work. But then at 6 weeks, the situation was starting to get a little dire, and the pediatrician was like, we have to have this baby gain some weight. So we started her on some formula, and everything got better, and it was just the opposite of what I thought would happen. And so anyways, I think that first 6 weeks was really semi-traumatizing for me, so I didn't once we started feeding her formula, I wasn't oh, I better pump, so probably my supply, I don't even know never knew even what the major problem was, but at this point now I breastfeed her about twice a day, and then the rest is formula, and we actually just started her on solids, and the times that we're breastfeeding is actually really nice, and at this point I'm sleeping, she knows how to latch, she knows even exactly how to find the nipple, there's no problems anymore. So my question was is there a reason, and is there a way that I could start replacing some of that formula at this point with breast milk, getting my supply up, without having to pump every 2 hours, or just needing to stop my life. So that's kind of my experience and my question.
Yep. Great. Well, first of all, great job, because as a first-time mom, I think in particular, most of the work that I have done over many, many years is working particularly with first-time moms, and those early weeks are so damn hard. It's especially when you're trying to get feeding established and you're dealing with all of these changes, I kind of think of it as like a machine that just plucks you up and just drops you in this completely alien space. And everything in your life is different. You're not going to work. You're not interacting with other humans. You're isolated at home. You can't put your baby down. It's either about to feeding, or just finished feeding, and you're thinking ahead to the next feeding, and you're sleep deprived, and your hormones are crazy, and all parts of your body are hurting and leaking, and the UPS truck stops coming every day, and your friends from work stop calling, and it is that first baby, those first few weeks after the first baby, it really is the biggest change in your entire life. And so, feeding is how you spend probably 50% of your focus or your day with a newborn, and when feeding isn't going well, it's really going to flavor and color your emotions and your entire experience. And working on breastfeeding and having sore nipples, or a baby who's not gaining weight well, and then being told that you need to be pumping, and so you're working on breastfeeding, and then you're pumping, and then you're supplementing, and your baby's not gaining weight. And I mean, it's emotionally and physically devastating, and that's really the experience that many women have. You're not alone there. We were talking to another mom last week, and in addition to a similar situation and breastfeeding challenges, she had a very traumatic birth and then recovering from a C-section. And, you put things like those types of experience on top of it, and it's not surprising that so many women have a very, very difficult experience. So it sounds like you did very well with the information and the support that you had at hand, and you worked on breastfeeding, and when you were told that you needed to try some other things, you tried some other things, and then when you were told that your baby was not thriving and was not gaining weight and you needed to feed your baby something else, you fed your baby something else. I mean, that's your job. Feed your baby and help your baby grow and gain and thrive, and you did that. So let's jump ahead and think about where you are right now, because now she's 6 months old and she's eating solid foods, and you're breastfeeding happily and comfortably several times a day, a couple times a day, and you're feeding formula and you're introducing solid foods. So at this point, formula is kind of like another type of solid food. It's a modified cow's milk material. So, that's what you're feeding, kind of like a yogurt, or kind of like, another type of food. So if you think about formula as another type of food, and you're also doing solid foods, and you're also breastfeeding a couple times a day, if you want to try increasing the breastfeeding without increasing pumping to push your supply, I would introduce breastfeeding at times where maybe she's sleepy or just waking up, or maybe she's working on sitting and she toppled over and bumped her head, or rolled over on a toy and she's fussing. So you can pick her up and comfort her at the breast. And maybe in addition to the 2 breastfeedings you're doing each day, if you add 1 or 2 additional nurture feedings or comfort feedings in there, that also is going to help both with the hormone and the closeness of breastfeeding, and can help increase your milk supply. As you begin to increase solid foods, she'll be getting breast milk, she'll be getting solid foods, and she'll be getting formula. And it sounds like for you that's a good good blend right now. It doesn't sound like your goal is to try to put everything aside and work so that you can increase your breast milk production, so that you can eliminate all the formula altogether. And especially as you're doing solid foods now, it seems like there's a whole new horizon out there of things that you can be feeding your baby, plus the breastfeeding. It's really about the relationship, I think, for you at this stage.
Yeah.
And there's still the great the long chain polyunsaturated fatty acids and the natural DHA and ARA that the formulas try to replicate, but with a variety of successes, and the antibodies in your breast milk, and the fact that it's milk that you're making specifically for your baby, and only you can make it, and the way you deliver it is a nurturing experience for both of you. So. I would focus on those positives and increase that experience as much as you find feasible and pleasant for the 2 of you.
Okay.
Does that help, Neely?
Yeah. I mean, especially when I've tried to add in another feeding, it's usually when she's hungry and she's like, wait, where's my bottle? Because she's smart already. Like, she knows when it's breast time and when it's bottle time, but maybe when she's not super hungry, or like you said, when she's just a little cranky, so it's not only about food but more about comfort, that sounds like something that would work.
and 2 or 3 times during the day, by offering her the breast as a comforting mechanism, that will over time increase your milk production. That hormonal stimulation. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Kind of like I know we got some questions about this on the website. Women that have had breast reductions, or women who've been told that they have insufficient glandular breast tissue. There are some women in those situations who may or may not be able to exclusively breastfeed their babies, and they may always need to use a combination of breast milk and formula, but to kind of shift the thinking a little bit, to think of breastfeeding as a positive experience for both you and your baby, and that all of the good things in the breast milk are going through to the baby, and to enjoy that experience of closeness and nurturing and feeding, and also the benefits of the breast milk, without thinking it has to be all or nothing at that stage in those types of situations.
Right.
So Lee is a working mom, and we got a lot of questions from working moms, specifically about, so you go to work, you're pumping several times a day, and at what point, Nancy, does it seem like you can kind of back off of pumping at work and still be breastfeeding your baby at home, maybe in the morning and at night? Is there sort of a time frame that women can expect to be able to do that?
Well, I think it depends on the age of the baby, the timing of the return to work, what moms have in the freezer as well. If they have milk supply in the freezer, and if they're focused on providing the baby with breast milk and then gradually solid foods, or if they're also using formula. But the issue with pumping at work, especially for women that are going back to work at 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks, is that if you want to continue breastfeeding after the return to work, then it's not just about bringing home enough milk to feed the baby at daycare or childcare the next day. It's about maintaining milk supply, because when the baby begins to get more and more bottles during the work day, if they then need to come to the breast and work really hard to get a minimal amount of milk, they're going to become frustrated very quickly, and that can become a downward spiral in terms of continuing breastfeeding. So if the goal is to maintain that breastfeeding relationship for a longer period of time, it really is important to maintain a strong milk supply, so that when the baby comes to the breast in the morning, in the evening, on the weekends, there's plenty of milk there for them, just like there is when they suck on a bottle at childcare. And then they don't get so frustrated and they arch and scream and pull away, and mom feels like, oh, I'm losing my milk, I need to go get a bottle. And then again, pretty quickly that can turn negative in terms of continuing breastfeeding. Typically, if there's a 10-hour separation, so an 8.5, 9-hour workday and a little commuting time on either end, usually I would advise a mom to express milk 3 times during the workday, and then maybe when the baby is in the 6 to 9 months and is starting to eat more solid foods at childcare, moms may be able to get away with pumping twice during the workday. And women have different storage capacities as well. So most women will need to express milk 3 times a day at work in order to bring home close to what the baby needs for the next day at childcare, where there are some fortunate moms who have a larger storage capacity, and they may be able to sit down and pump a larger volume of milk per sitting, and so they may be able to pump less frequently in the workplace.
Great. Now, Paula, I'd like to bring you into the conversation. And just, can you unmute yourself?
Yep.
Yeah, there you go. Yep. And so can you, here's the thing. You told me when we were talking about doing this that you had some troubles breastfeeding, and your experience led you to feel like you could become a lactation consultant tomorrow. So can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, it's so hard saying this in front of Nancy, but anyway,
okay.
we're talking openly. Yeah, I had a hard time at the beginning with my first child. It was very painful. The milk took a while to come in. I had a C-section after a long labor. I felt like my supply wasn't big enough. I was getting advice everywhere I went. I had they gave me some strange contraption at the hospital to breastfeed while I was formula feeding. I went to a lactation consultant a few times back at home. and was given all sorts of different advice. And she's a lovely woman, and she was well-meaning, but my experience was that it only added to my stress and anxiety. There was one time I went and she weighed the baby before and after I fed the baby, and she hadn't, gained that much weight. I don't remember. And that stressed me out. There was a lot of talk about pumping, so feed the baby and then pump an extra 10 minutes. And as a new mom who was still getting used to the pain of it, pumping was especially painful. I couldn't find the right, what are those phalanges called, right? Like the sizing, nothing quite worked. And in the end, I just figured it out, basically, with the baby, and my mom kind of smacked some sense into me at a certain point. But also, like you said, certain women have different express more or less milk, and I would get very little when I pumped. And I think in retrospect that's probably because I had just fed the baby, which I felt wasn't communicated to me well. I also I just didn't ever get that much pumping, and yet Ida, my baby, seemed totally 100% fine this whole time. She never fussed or seemed cranky or anything, but I was driving myself crazy. And she wasn't gaining weight like super fast. Anyway, at the end of the day, I felt like I didn't actually get that much from the lactation consultant that I couldn't have eventually figured out on my own, or with the selective advice of friends who had gone through that before. And so in my case, it made me more anxious, and I didn't feel like there was a lot of things that she told me that I didn't know or couldn't have figured out. I don't know. Does that kind of make sense? So then, like, my joke is, I could be a lactation consultant tomorrow, and it's a joke, but it's also kind of like, I think there's some truth to it sometimes. And when my friends have babies, I'm always like, let me come over and work on your latch and open up the baby's mouth, and I got this under control, and they're all like, okay, well, I'll let you know, because they don't necessarily need my help. But I mean, the funny thing is as traumatizing as those first couple months were, I remember breastfeeding very fondly, and I really want to get involved in my friends' breastfeeding, and I want to, because I like it, because I feel like, I can save you money and anxiety, and it's a little bit of a shtick, but there's also some truth to how I feel about it.
Yeah, I think that there's nothing that most new moms need more than a cheering squad in their corner, than a family member or a friend or a sister or a neighbor or someone who says, like, you can do this, and if you need someone to sit with you and encourage you, I can do that. And if you need someone to show you some techniques, I've done it. I can show you, And so I think that that there's a huge benefit and a huge important role there. And there's so many programs out there that try to encourage this type of peer-to-peer counseling, and not everybody needs an IBCLC board-certified lactation consultant. A lot of times what people need is some encouragement and someone to say, look, maybe if you try holding her this way, try this position, put your feet up here, that pillow's too low, let's try this pillow. And, sometimes, honestly, it's just helping somebody kind of get through those early days and weeks and giving them some encouragement and confidence to kind of stay with it and see how things go. And most of the time things will work their way out, and if they're not getting better, then maybe that's where there's a benefit to someone with more clinical experience to give assistance. I think that you're doing your friends a huge service to give them encouragement and support. I bet that there's a lot of moms listening at home or at work right now who wish that they had somebody who would come over and say, let me help you get that baby done a little better.
So Paula will offer the service of coming over, opening the baby's mouth, and putting it on the boob.
Yeah.
That's yeah.
Aggressively opening it and slamming your boob into it until it works. Yeah, something like that.
Great. So I wanna move on now to listener questions, and Paula and Lee, feel free to pipe up if you feel like you want to respond to some of these too. We got a lot of questions, like probably more fell into this category than anything else, the lopsided boob questions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I'm gonna just read one to you because I really love it. My embarrassing question is, how do I even my boobs out? I've been breastfeeding for almost a year with no plans to stop soon. My right breast produces more than my left, plus my daughter prefers it. It's about twice the size of my left. I could hide it in sweaters, but now summer is coming and it's great weather, and I do not want to put these uneven boobs in a swimsuit. Help, Nancy. What's your response to this?
Mm-hmm. Yes, this is a very common scenario and a common concern. It's very normal during breastfeeding to have uneven boobage. And if you think about it, us as the human species, we're not a mirror image. So you have one heart, one spleen, one liver. We're not a symmetric people, and it's very normal to have one foot that's slightly larger, one ear. Before we started, I was adjusting my glasses because I have one ear that's a little higher. My glasses sit crooked, and that's very normal. So it's very normal to have one breast that produces more milk than the other, but it's very much a chicken and egg scenario. So which comes first? Does the baby prefer one breast because it makes more milk, or does that breast begin to make more milk because either the baby or the mom prefer to get that baby latched on to that side first? So for example, you might have one nipple that's flatter than the other. So if the nipple is less flat, maybe it's easier to get the baby latched on in that position on that breast. Some moms will subconsciously have a preference, and they'll latch the baby on a particular side because then it leaves the other hand free so that they can type on their keyboard or scroll on their iPhone. So there's a lot of reasons why you may start the baby more frequently on one breast, or keep them longer on one breast, or they may just choose to hang out on one breast longer, maybe because it's a better producer, or if you squirt and spray, your baby may actually prefer the side that doesn't make as much milk. And it may not be physiologic, because sometimes moms will find that in a second baby, the other breast, they flip-flop. So it's not just that the right breast always has made more milk. It may change from baby to baby. But on the other hand, it's very normal, even physiologically, to have differences. People are right-handed. Sometimes the left breast makes more milk. But it's quite variable. And a lot of times moms don't realize it until they start pumping, and then they actually see the discrepancy, and they'll see, oh, I can pump 3.5 ounces from my left breast, but only 2 ounces from the right. But put them together, and both breasts together make all the milk and then some that your baby needs. That's just the way it is. Typically, between the two breasts, you'll make the milk your baby needs. And two breasts are very nice to have, because a mom can breastfeed one baby with one breast, or she can breastfeed twins with two breasts. So I would say, cosmetically, if there really is a 2-cup size difference in the breasts, most likely you're going to notice it more than anybody else. If you really think it's noticeable, you can get a padded bra, and then just only use the padding on the side where you feel like you need it. But in general, most of the time, people don't notice the difference. It's the mom that's very self-conscious. And when you finish breastfeeding, there's a process called involution, and that means that the milk ducts and the breast milk-making tissue shrink, and what's left is the breast fat, and so the breast will even out a little bit more when you're all finished breastfeeding. So you've got that to think about as well.
I would just add one, because I haven't dealt with as many breasts as Nancy has, but I will say that I hadn't thought of this in like 3 years, but I remember feeling like my left breast was so much better at its job than my right breast. And it wasn't noticeable to the outside, I think, but I remember just feeling like, I don't know, this might sound ridiculous, but you might also, like, I think what Nancy says is true. It's going to involute, and it's going to go back to pretty much the way it was, sort of. But I don't know. It's like, for me, it was kind of interesting to see the different breasts as having slightly different personalities, and that was kind of like, it was a little bit of a narrative of my breastfeeding that, oh, now this thing's going to happen with the left one, and now the right one's going to do its thing. And so I don't know if this is advice so much as sort of turning it into sort of a lighthearted, the story. I don't know. Are they characters in your lives? Maybe.
We we do this closed Facebook group called Longest Shortest Time Mamas, and a lot of the mamas name their lopsided boobs different things.
Right.
So that's the thing. Yeah. So here's another topic that we got a lot of questions about, being engorged. So here is this question. I'm curious how to start sleeping through the night myself. My 6-month-old has started sleeping longer stretches occasionally, which is awesome, but my 2 girls cannot make it longer than 4 hours before becoming engorged, painful, and waking me. I've been waking up and pumping, but then I stress that I won't have milk when my son decides to wake up and wants to feed, which is unpredictable. So can I train the ladies to go longer stretches without negatively affecting my overall supply?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question, and it's right around that age too. Typically around 5-6 months of age, and maybe you're finding this with your 6-month-old too. Typically, that's when babies begin to go to sleep earlier. So when you have a newborn, usually you're keeping the baby with you in the living room, and then finally at 10 or 11 o'clock you do that final feeding, and that's you figure, okay, this time we'll call this nighttime, and you put the baby down to sleep, and then you collapse too. But by the time your baby is 4, 5, 6, 7 months, you're starting hopefully to do that bedtime routine, and you're getting the baby down to sleep at 7 or 8 or 9, and then that's often when the parents will have dinner, collapse in front of the TV, have a couple of hours of extra time before they themselves go to sleep. So if you're starting to find that your baby is beginning to sleep a 5 or 6 or 7 hour stretch at the beginning of the night, I would suggest that moms do that breastfeeding, get the baby to sleep, have her dinner, do whatever she's going to do, and then express milk just before she goes to sleep, because that way she'll have another couple of ounces she can put in the fridge to send to childcare over the next week, and then also it will extend the period of time that she's physically comfortable while the baby's sleeping. So hopefully it's going to be the baby that wakes her up at 3 or 4 a.m. instead of her breasts that wake her up at 2 or 3 a.m. Because once your baby is sleeping longer, just like this mom wrote in, you don't want your breasts to wake you up if the baby's still sleeping. So express before you go to sleep. That way your breasts won't wake you up. You won't be worrying about your supply. You'll be storing away a little extra milk, which you might need for childcare, and you'll stay physically comfortable and not risk blocked ups or discomfort in the middle of the night.
Can I just ask a question though? Because I had a good friend who had an oversupply issue, and some of the advice she got was also to pump at different places to sort of manage it in different ways. And from what I saw from her, and from also just from other people I know who had a lot of supply, that pumping was sort of the opposite of what they needed, because every time they pumped, they were telling, and again, I don't know, but they seemed like they were telling their boobs to make more milk. And what they ultimately needed to do was tell their boobs to chill out, because they only need the milk when their baby wants the milk. And unless you're right, they want to store some for childcare, but it feels like are you playing with fire a little bit to tell your overproducing boobs to produce when the baby isn't asking for it? You're sort of manipulating the situation, because ultimately the longer the baby sleeps, the longer you sleep, and the baby doesn't need the milk anyway. And you do have some painful nights, and maybe you get a clogged duct, and I can tell you that's horribly painful, or mastitis, and all that sucks. But doesn't that eventually pass, and then you've regulated?
Yeah, I think it depends on the age of the baby, because, for the mom that was asking this question at 6 months, certainly more moms at that stage are concerned about milk supply. I mean, we know that at that point, about 70 to 80% of moms are back at work, at least part-time, and the moms that struggle with oversupply at that stage versus concerns about supply are significantly different. So, I mean, you're right. For a mom that's struggling with oversupply, the answer isn't just to keep on pumping, 24/7. That we would actually taper down the pumping a little bit. But for a mom who has a baby who's starting to sleep longer and she's waking up an hour or two before the baby with her breasts engorged, especially if she is expressing milk at work, usually that anxiety is that she's not bringing home as much milk as the baby needs for the next day at childcare. So sometimes pumping before mom goes to sleep is a good way of both putting a little extra milk in the fridge and keeping her body physically comfortable over the next 6 to 8 hours as the baby's sleeping, and hopefully she's sleeping too.
Great. So I just want to remind everybody too, if you are wanting to submit questions to Nancy, there are a couple ways to do it. There's a Q&A button in the Google Hangout if you're on Google+, or you can go to Twitter and submit your questions using the hashtag #YourBoobs. So Lee, I want to bring you back into the conversation. You had a second part of your question, so I'm going to let you ask that now.
Yeah, so my other part of the question, because I was kind of torn between wanting to increase my breastfeeding and then thinking like, what's the point anyways, because I've been having a lot of problems in terms of like my vagina getting back to normal. And this, I had granulation tissue, and that was taken care of, but it's still been very painful, and my gynecologist said that it might have something to do with still breastfeeding and not having enough estrogen. So part of me was like, well, if she's not even like getting much breast milk, maybe, maybe it would be better for my vagina anyways if that part of it was over.
You mean thinking about complete weaning so that you would, is that what you're?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to do that. I mean, to be honest, like I enjoy the breastfeeding that we have, even if it's like not a lot, but I also wanted like, I want the rest of my body to be back to normal. I mean, it's been a long time at this point.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. Well, so let's see. Let's a couple things. First of all, it is true that estrogen, when you're breastfeeding, prolactin levels are a little bit higher, and that estrogen levels are lower. And estrogen is responsible not just for vaginal lubrication, but also the elasticity of the tissue. But right now, it sounded like you're breastfeeding just a couple times a day. Has your period returned? I know that's a personal question on a Google Hangout. You don't have to answer that if you don't want to.
It's really funny that you ask that because it did today.
Oh, yay! Yay, you're boo.
I know.
I wanted to say it because that kind of signals the hormonal cascade of your body is getting back in sync, and so I wouldn't say that you have no estrogen circulating, and there are vaginal estrogen creams that can be used topically. The issue, the thing sometimes we see is that breastfeeding kind of gets blamed for everything. And here you are, breastfeeding twice a day, and that's getting, you had granulation tissue, you had some secondary surgeries to have that removed, a procedure to have the granulation tissue removed, and you're still having vaginal pain and discomfort, and the breastfeeding is kind of being blamed for that. But I wonder what your OB will say 3 months or 6 months after you complete breastfeeding, and if you're still having discomfort, would they say, oh, well, you just, weaned 3 months ago, so you have to give it another 3 months or something? If they say that the granulation tissue is completely healed inside, if within a few months things are not feeling better, then you may want to go see a gyno-urologist or a gynecologist or a urologist that specializes in pelvic floor issues, because there's a lot of different tissue and muscle that goes on there. Did you had a vaginal birth?
Yes.
Yeah, so there's a lot of changes that go on in the pelvic floor after delivery, and sometimes physical therapy can help. There's actually pelvic floor physical therapy treatments. There's different types of creams and medications. There's different types of exercises, and it may be worth actually getting a more formal opinion as to what might be going on internally if you're still having discomfort in a couple of months, because granulation tissue removal, breastfeeding twice a day, and your period coming back, estrogen really, shouldn't be causing a lot of vaginal issues at this point. Lack of estrogen.
And vaginal issues are like such a huge part of healing. After having a baby, and anyone who's listened to this show knows that has been a big issue for me, and we are planning on doing a whole Google Hangout about that at another time. Maybe in the fall.
Good.
So, but yes, but there are
and I just want to point out, in terms of pelvic floor issues, I'm sure you'll cover this in that Hangout, but people only think of vaginal pain or urinary issues, but the number 2 side of things, gas and bowel movements, also are pelvic floor issues, and sometimes women have a hard time understanding that those symptoms, are not being able to control those 2 things, actually are pelvic floor issues. And even if you don't have a vaginal birth, just the weight, the heavy weight of, for example, twins pressing down on the uterus, and then a C-section still can cause some pelvic floor issues.
Great. So here's another kind of theme that we were seeing a lot, sort of my baby is a jerk theme. My 4-week-old son wants to be on the boob or the bottle all the time. It seems like whenever he's awake, he wants to feed. If I take him off, he screams. It seems like the only way he tolerates being awake is by being on the boob. Also, the worst is when he's on the boob angrily. He grunts and groans and spits my nipple out, only to want it 2 seconds later, and then does the same thing, arms flailing, legs kicking, and fussing. Yep. Sometimes it's gas, sometimes he needs to burp, but sometimes it seems like he's doing it just to be an a-hole. So frustrating. So this is, I think I can really relate to this. What do you say about this, Nancy?
Oh, this is exactly why I say that, normal newborn behavior is, it's mind-blowing to the uninitiated. You hear about, it's like a joke, the bleary-eyed new parents driving the newborn around in the car at night, I have a saying that about 100% of new moms think that their baby is gassier than the average baby. Like, no, but I know babies are gassy, but not like my baby. My baby is gassier than the average baby. This can't be normal. He turns beet red, he screams bloody murder, he grunts, he groans, he arches. At 4 o'clock in the morning, I'll do my little imitation. They arch and they strain and they make all this noise, and then finally you'll hear. So all that drama, that red face, that arching, that straining, just for a little gas. But babies are very dramatic about their digestive system. A 4-week-old, from 3 weeks to 8 weeks, that is just the hardest time in the life of a new mom and a new baby. Young babies are spending more and more time awake. Newborns, I love them dearly, but they do 3 things: they eat, they sleep, and they fuss. They eat, they sleep, and they fuss. So if they're not eating and they're not sleeping, then you're actively involved in keeping them happy, because they only do 3 things. They eat, they sleep, and they fuss when they're brand new. They don't have a lot of hobbies yet. So the thing that makes the baby feel most content is being held close, rhythmic movement, walking, and sucking. And if there's milk coming out, that's an added bonus. So it's not surprising that a 4-, 5-, or 6-week-old is content to nurse and doze, and then as soon as you try to take them off, they'll protest and say, no, I wasn't done yet. Or if you can take them off and put them down, within 5 or 10 minutes, they're flailing and they want to come right back to where they were. Pretty soon they will develop some hobbies. They'll figure out that they can gaze at the light and at your face, and they can get their hands in their mouth, and soon they'll be swiping at toys, and pretty soon there'll be other things in their life that are almost as good as being held and walked and nursing. But between weeks, say 3 to 8, pretty much you're gonna want to figure out a way to keep your baby physically close. If you can have your hands free, that's an added bonus. So a sling or an ergo or a carrier. Sit on the physio ball so you get that rhythmic vestibular motion going. You can sit in front of your computer and type, or in front of the kitchen table on the physio ball with the baby and the carrier, and you can eat your dinner. They will nurse and doze for an hour or 2 hours if you don't get up. But yeah, when you try to take them off and put them down, they will wake up and they will fuss. And that's pretty normal. So I think, most of us just don't have a lot of experience as to life with a normal, healthy newborn. But that is what they're like, and it is mind-blowing, and it is exhausting. And I don't say this to minimize the challenges to a new mom, but hopefully a little bit to normalize. So that's why I really encourage moms to get out every day, build a routine, but also join a group or find a gathering of moms and babies that they can get to regularly, babies close in age, so they can see that wide variety of normal and realize that they're not the only one who has a baby that fusses every time they try to put them down, or wants to cluster feed from 4 p.m. to 11 p.m. and then sleeps for 5 hours. That it's very common to feel like you're the only one that's struggling with this gassy, fussy, spit-uppy baby who has explosive bowel movements and won't be put down, and all the other moms are off having a great time shopping at Baby Gap and taking walks and having lunch, and you're the one that's home crying. And when you hear from other moms with 5-week-olds, you begin to realize, okay, maybe that's what a 5-week-old baby is like.
What about, here's another baby behavior question, what about biting? How should moms handle biting once their kids get teeth and realize they can get a reaction from you when they bite?
Biting at the breast.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so a couple things. Start thinking about nipping, biting in the bud actually before your baby have teeth. So a lot of times I will get tweets and emails from moms who say, my 10-week-old baby is teething. The hands are in the mouth and she's chewing and drooling, and I can't believe she's doing it all this so early. So teething, you can think of teething as a developmental behavior. The hands are coming to the mouth. Anything they're able to hold goes in the mouth, and they begin to chew, and they begin to have excess saliva production. None of those things actually mean a tooth is coming. So, of course, some babies will have teeth very early, but typically a baby may get their first tooth sometime between 6 to 7 months. That's just on average, so a little earlier, a little later, but you'll see those hands in the mouth and those chewing behaviors quite early at 3 and 4 and 5 months old, but it typically doesn't herald that a tooth is imminent. And so if your baby is waking up a lot at 4 months old in the middle of the night, don't blame it on teeth, because that's actually, that's okay, we won't go into the sleeping stuff, but that's generally not teeth. That's sleep association stuff. But, so what do you do at that point? Don't let the baby chew your knuckle. So a lot of times at 4 and 5 months, moms will let the baby chew their finger and chew their knuckle. Your baby doesn't understand why it's okay to bite down and clamp down on your finger but not on your nipple. They feel the same to your baby. So make a little mental rule to yourself that no biting other people's skin, and start that rule before your baby has teeth. So if your baby wants to chew and gnaw, give them teethers and links and things like that they can chew on. Don't let them chew on the bottom nipple, the bottle nipple either, because bottle nipple, mom's nipple, it's hard for them to differentiate between those two as well. So give them teethers to chew, not your fingers, not your chin, not your nose. And then when they realize that chewing or biting at the breast is typically a stage that comes right when a tooth is erupting. So the day before and the couple of days after a new tooth actually has cut through is when they're going to be at the most nippy. So be proactive, pay attention, end the feeding before your baby does. You can take the baby off the breast when you sense that he's slowing down and playing around. And if your baby ever does actually clamp down with a top tooth and a bottom tooth, try to resist the urge to shriek, although it is shriek worthy. It hurts like hell, but you're better off smushing the baby into the breast and then getting a finger to their mouth to release the suction and taking them off. If you try to pull the baby off, you're going to get hurt. But when your baby clamps down like that, and this is very common around 10 months old, when your baby clamps down, smush them into the breast so their nose is up against the breast tissue and they can't breathe, and then they have to open their mouth, and then you can take them off the breast, and then you say just very firmly and clearly, not yell at them because you don't want to scare them, you just say no biting, and biting hurts mom, and end that feeding. And typically you do go through some of these phases, but usually you can work through them.
Now, here's one about nausea. So this mom wants to know, she has a 6-month-old, and she gets nausea with breastfeeding, and she has not yet puked on the baby, but she's worried that she will, and she thought it would be getting better over time, but it seems to be getting worse.
That's sad. That's sad because that's probably a physiologic response to the oxytocin in her blood system, and there are different types of responses to oxytocin, and nausea is one, dizziness is another, and then there's actually one that's called a dysphoric mood sensation, where moms have a wave of either anxiety or depression. And it's not that they're anxious or depressed about a particular situation. It's a physiologic response to the nipple stimulation and the milk letting down. And in this case, this mom, it's nausea. So I think for her, by now the baby's 6 months old, hopefully she's maybe, figured out some things that may make it worse or better. So whether it's, using acupressure like the C-bands, if she's got those on when she sits down to breastfeed and she can press them when she begins to feel the nausea, or maybe it's having, something that she can nibble on, some crackers or something, so that she doesn't have an empty stomach, or maybe it's having a hot drink. Or maybe it's just distraction. Maybe this happens for 2 or 3 minutes as the milk is letting down, and then the rest of the feeding, is not uncomfortable. So, so it might be maybe just, some kind of deep breathing or meditation or distraction by watching something or listening to something. But this really is it's a real physiologic response, and it's one of many different varieties. So as I said, nausea, waves of panic or anxiety, waves of depression. Most women, especially during the early weeks, they'll have a sensation of relaxation or drowsiness. And then sometimes moms don't want to, they don't want to talk about it. They may have a sensation of pleasure or arousal, and I don't mean sexual arousal, but just a kind of a good feeling. And oxytocin is a nice hormone, but different people respond to this differently. And in her situation, unfortunately, she's got nausea, and that's not unusual.
Okay, here's one that just came in. My son is 5 months old, and he's a big comfort sucker. He will stay on the boob for 1.5 hours. How can I tell when he's actually done feeding and not just there for comfort?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Can I jump in on this?
Mm-hmm.
And my own experience is that I had a similar experience, and this is again my own experience with my baby. Really, I'd be like, what is with women who can be done in 10 minutes per side? She's still going an hour and a half later, and I just feel like what was helpful to me in the end was not. It's hard to do this, but to not care, because I think for me there's this idea that some people have that we should, after a while they should get on a schedule, and it's not good to let them nurse for comfort, because then they'll just want to. People have different philosophies of it, but I also feel like, and I said this before, I think it's like everything changes so quickly before you even know it's going to change. And if your baby's at a time where he or she just wants to be there for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then is done for half an hour and then is on again for an hour, it can be deeply inconvenient. But I don't know. I personally feel like there's been too much negativity towards the idea of comfort nursing, and I feel like that's part of what nursing is. And if that's what the baby wants, then it's okay to give it to the baby unless it's driving you crazy, and that's kind of a different story. In which case, you've got to figure out a way to extract yourself. But if it's not driving you crazy, I don't think there's anything wrong with it personally.
Nancy, what do you think?
No, I think that's true, and it has to do with your parenting style and your lifestyle, and also if you have to pee, or if you have a toddler who is clamoring for lunch, then you may not want or be able to sit on the couch for an hour and a half and nurse your baby. In the early days, babies really can and do take a long time to feed, and as they get older, many babies get quicker and more efficient, but women have different women and babies together develop different types of feeding patterns. So some women put out, they make milk slow and steady. Some babies can transfer a lot of milk in a very short period of time, and they're quick and efficient eaters. So it's both a combination of milk making and baby feeding styles, and then, kind of goodness of fit or compatibility. But I think that in this particular situation with the baby with the mom with the 5-month-old, I don't think the baby is actually actively feeding during that entire time, but a lactating breast is never full or empty. It's more like a leaky faucet. So there's always another drop and another drop, and so it's not true to say the baby's not getting anything. The baby is getting a little drop and a little drop and a little drop of milk, but to your point, just because your baby is content to nurse and doze doesn't mean that you have to be a martyr and sit there the entire time either. So it's perfectly fine to end a feeding if you need to make an appointment, or you need to go to the bathroom, or get a glass of water, or eat your lunch, or tend to another child. So many babies did not read the book chapter that said that they're supposed to self-detach when they're done, and a lot of babies don't self-detach. So you may take the baby off the breast, and the baby may protest, but you can either swaddle or put the baby in a sling or a carrier, and usually just that movement will lull them back to sleep. So I think that just because a baby will stay latched on for an hour and a half at 5 months doesn't necessarily mean that, you need to do every feeding and keep it to that length.
I had a question on that too. This is probably like the unanswerable question of breastfeeding, but maybe I'll ask it again. But so when I was, first doing this in the beginning, like my baby would be on my boob like all day and all night, and if I took her off, she was just so upset, and this would be like 5-hour stretch, and a lot of people are just saying, that's what they do, they're nursing or they're sleeping, just stick with it. But it turned out that she was like starving, and like I wonder, like how, like when do you know that this is not normal anymore, like that there's something wrong? Like how, just for like I don't know, I'll have another baby, but like for my friends that ask, or if I ever want to give advice, like how would I know?
Yeah. No, it's an extremely valid question, and that's why having follow-up is so important. So that's why we want to see the baby, or the pediatrician or nurse practitioner wants to see the baby several days after discharge, and then we want to know at 7 to 10 days that the baby is back at or beyond birth weight, and you want to get these checkpoints that the baby is gaining 3/4 of an ounce to an ounce a day after 2 weeks or so, and making sure in the early days. The questions about, is the baby peeing and pooping? How are your nipples feeling? Have you had the breast changes? Do they feel fuller and then emptier? What's going on in the baby's diapers? That tells us a lot. But really, the baby's weight gain tells us a great deal. And then, beyond that, sometimes you may have a baby who is growing and gaining fine or adequately or very well, and a mom who's completely miserable, and so then you may want to intervene. The mom may ask you for changes because she is not she's not happy sitting and feeding the baby for 10 hours a day. So again, it's finding out, well, what are the mom's goals, and how can we nourish and nurture the baby, and also the mom and baby and the family relationship, and keep everybody happy and healthy. Because if a mom is distressed and miserable or anxious, then she's not having the best experience as a new mom either. So it's not just about, we'll do whatever we need to do to make sure this baby is getting breast milk. That is not the answer to issues. That's always.
Well, thanks, Nancy. I think we're gonna sadly have to wrap up here. But first, I need to give a big thank you to Medela, who sponsored this event. This was a reward for their very generous contribution to our Kickstarter campaign. And And you can find out all about Medila's breast pumps at medila.com. Here at The Longest Shortest Time, we've heard all kinds of pumping on the go stories. And Medila told us that one new mom named Laura had this interesting experience of pumping at the transition tents while she ran a triathlon. And we get all kinds of pumping at work and pumping in crazy situation stories on our closed Facebook group for moms. It's called Longest Shortest Time Mamas, and we would love for anyone watching this to join the group. It is full of funny, open women having these deeply supportive conversations. It's like talking to your best friends. And so you can find a link to that on our website, or just look for Longest Shortest Time Mamas in Facebook. You can hear our show, more episodes of our show, at longestshortesttime.com. This was just so much fun, and we are going to be doing more of these soon. The next one is going to be in July. It's on the topic of kids and eating. And so we'll keep you posted on that. The best way to find out about these things is through our newsletter. There's a link to that at our website. And thank you to all of you wonderful guests on our panel. Thanks also to Joanna Solotara, who is sitting there in the corner. You might have been wondering who that person who's not talking is. She is my associate producer and has been fielding your questions and doing a great job. So thanks to Lee and to Paula and to Nancy. You can follow Nancy on Twitter, where she triages breastfeeding questions similar to what she did here, but in tweet form. She is at Nancy Holtzman, and you can also find her old YouTube webinars that I mentioned if you just do a search for ISIS Parenting. That's ISIS. So thank you, everybody. I really enjoyed this, and can't wait to do more of them. Bye-bye.
Bye.